Video games have evolved from simple pastimes into complex digital ecosystems, captivating millions of players across the United States. However, hidden beneath their vibrant graphics and immersive worlds is a concerning trend. Gambling-like monetization practices that target vulnerable audiences, particularly the youth. With the rise of microtransactions, loot boxes, and limited time events, gaming has transformed from a hobby into a marketplace designed to manipulate player psychology for profit. Parents, siblings, and college students must understand this issue because the mental health and financial well-being of the younger generation are at risk. This issue brief proposes the implementation of federal regulations targeting gambling-like monetization strategies in video games marketed towards minors. At the core of this issue is a psychological mechanism familiar to gambling: variable racial reinforcement. Many monetization tactics in games mirror the structure of slot machines, using unpredictable rewards to hook players into repeated spending. Loot boxes, for example, allow players to pay for randomized in-game items, creating a cycle of anticipation, disappointment, and re-engagement. The uncertainty of rewards drives compulsive behavior, especially in younger players whose cognitive development leaves them vulnerable to exploitation. Additionally, developers frequently deploy time-limited events and exclusive cosmetics to foster the fear of missing out, also known as FOMO, a psychological phenomenon that compels players to engage in the game and spend money to avoid social exclusion or regret. This creates a powerful emotional incentive to make impulsive purchases without fully considering the consequences. Research indicates that young players are particularly susceptible to these manipulative practices. According to a study published in Computers in Human Behavior, there is a strong correlation between loot box spending and problem gambling behaviors among adolescents. Moreover, gaming companies often blur the line between cosmetic items and competitive advantages, pressuring players to spend money not only to personalize their avatars, but also to remain competitive within the game. The financial implications can be severe. Many games allow for small incremental purchases that accumulate over time, often leading to unexpected credit card bills for parents. Beyond financial harm, however, is the emotional toll. Players report heightened levels of stress, regret, and social pressure associated with gambling-like mechanics. This psychological strain disproportionately affects minors whose ability to self-regulate spending is still underdeveloped. In that case, federal regulation is necessary. While some countries such as Belgium and the Netherlands have implemented bans or restrictions on loot boxes, the United States lacks a cohesive federal response. Industry self-regulation, such as voluntary labeling systems, have proven inadequate in protecting young consumers. Given the scale and complexity of the issue, a federal approach is warranted. A federal policy could include mandating clear disclosure of drop rates and odds for randomized items, restricting the sale of loot boxes and similar mechanics to players over 18, implementing spending limits for accounts registered to minors, and requiring parental consent mechanisms for in-game purchases exceeding a certain threshold. These measures would align the gaming industry with existing consumer protection standards applied in other sectors. To address some feasibility and objection concerns, critics may argue that federal regulation infringes on personal freedom or stifles creativity within the gaming industry. However, the aim of this proposal is not to ban microtransactions entirely, but to introduce ethical guardrails that prevent exploitation. Furthermore, implementing these policies would not harm the industry's profitability in the long run. Rather, It would foster trust between developers and consumers, encouraging sustainable engagement. Enforcement mechanisms could involve collaborations between the Federal Trade Commission, also known as the FTC, consumer advocacy groups, and industry stakeholders. Penalties for non-compliance would create incentives for companies to adopt responsible monetization practices. Parents and older siblings serve as the first line of defense against exploitative gaming practices. By educating themselves for change, they can protect younger family members from financial and psychological harm. College students, many of whom grew up with gaming, can leverage their understanding of these systems to foster responsible gaming habits within their communities as well. To help flesh out this idea of monetization of gaming and its impacts, I have a couple of guests here that are willing to share their experiences with monetization in games and just briefly delve into the subject matter.
Hello, my name is Arthur Nunez Vigal. My main gacha games were Arknights and also loot boxes on Overwatch.
My name is Danian, and I usually play gacha games such as Cookie Run, Fire Emblem Heroes, and recently not Fire Emblem, Final Fantasy VII, as well as Overwatch, Fortnite, Marvel Rivals, and Monster Hunter.
Hi, I'm Carlos Durango, a military veteran, and I play Warframe, Magic the Gathering, and Zenless Zone Zero.
Hello, I'm Tyler. I am a Twitch streamer and YouTuber. I do YouTube videos. On both, I am Big T Buck Hunter.
Have you ever felt the pressure to log in daily or spend money just to keep up with limited time events in a game?
Yeah, definitely. Gacha games have a system that you normally get more resources when an event is going on, so it kind of pushed me to log in daily every day to get those event limited stuff.
Can you recall a time when missing out on an in-game item or event made you feel left out socially, especially among friends?
There have been times where I've been trying to play with friends, like in Fortnite or Overwatch, and they try to do that whole matching skin thing, and I just do not have the skin corresponding with the theme that they select because I just wasn't playing at the time, which is really unfortunate because the skins are really nice. But aside from that, that is the only time that I can recall.
What kind of language or visuals do game developers use to make these offers feel urgent or exclusive?
That really annoying red countdown clock as to when the event's going to be over. They throw that real big right in front of you.
And moving on from that to some more personal counts, what was your first experience with loot boxes or in-game purchases, and how did it make you feel?
Definitely the first in-game purchase I ever made was, I believe, in Little Big Planet, but that doesn't really pertain. So I will say Warframe. Because I think I bought like the premium currency. And it made me feel kind of bad. I had a little bit of buyer's remorse afterwards. I think that's definitely one of the feelings I felt.
Ooh, I think definitely my first full interaction with them was Overwatch, 100%, and the original loot boxes in that game. The game would start out giving you a few for free, and every time, like every event, they'd give you a free one. And it was unfortunately it was nice. Overwatch has a way of like, ooh, you got a new cool skin that's rare. Don't you want to open more to maybe get a skin that you really want? And it definitely got me hooked.
How do time-limited events and exclusive cosmetics influence your sense of identity or status in the gaming community?
It doesn't affect my identity, more so just the status, because like when you have like a really old cosmetic that is practically unobtainable or like super rare, most people have a sense of superiority, which is kind of problematic. It can cause problems in the community. I've seen it happen in multiple, especially Fortnite. Jesus. But I don't really know how it would cause an effect in any other way.
There's definitely like a wow factor to people having specific things, or a wow, that person has that. A really good example I didn't give earlier was a skin for a League of Legends character. So it was also a random skin, and you had to pay upwards of $200 for it. And because the character it was for, Jin, was my most played character of all time, I made the choice to buy that skin, and I haven't seen anyone use it. And I even get people sometimes in the game say, "Oh crap, that guy has the Jin skin." Uh, so it definitely pushes people, I'd say, to want stuff purely for the wow factor.
In regards to that, have you or someone you know ever spent more money than intended on a game? And what happened afterward?
For sure. I mean, we both know somebody who has spent over $500 in one night on gotcha games. Nothing really happened in the aftermath of it, but they felt bad.
Me, I did, and I couldn't afford groceries for a month.
And how did your family react when they found out about in-game spending? And did they understand what those purchases were for?
They didn't really understand what they were for, but at least personally, I tried to keep it to enough of a minimum that it wasn't like a huge deal among the family, but they still didn't get why I would continue to spend money on a game.
It was definitely a lot of disappointment for just pixels on a screen that you don't really see a lot, or moving images on a mobile game. They somewhat understood, but it was definitely like frowned upon. Like, you should stop, don't do that anymore, please. It's not good for you. And I 100% agree. I definitely have pulled back away from that.
It depends on who you talk to. My family. My sister and my mom don't really get it. My dad kind of does. But usually they don't really care what I spend my money on because it's my money.
Do you think young players understand the value of money when making in-game purchases? Why or why not?
Absolutely not. I'm not going to lie. I feel like it's just a number on a screen because you have to pay the money into the premium currency most of the time. And it does feel like it loses the sense of value from one thing to another. And I do feel like people, not even kids, just people in general, do not. There's a disconnect because, like, oh, I'm spending $100 on this, but you don't see the $100 anymore, so to speak.
Absolutely not. I think like especially young kids, they just get a hold of a credit card and they know there's money on it and they don't really realize that like the value of what they're getting. They just know it costs an amount of money. My parents have money, so obviously it's worth getting.
Games like Fortnite don't have random skins. You buy what you want. But back in the day, especially launch Overwatch, and when that, like Call of Duty, when that was really popular, kids were spending an inordinate amount of money. And I can even say when I was like 12, 13, when Overwatch came out, I didn't really have a good grasp on the pure amount of money I was spending on skins that I was not even guaranteed to get.
And while on the topic of these financial understandings then, how much would you estimate you spent on games with microtransactions in the past year?
Jesus. I want to say at least $5,000.
Personally, I've actually been very staunchly against microtransactions this year, but that does not mean I didn't get any. I've probably spent this year around $20 on microtransactions total, which is less than previous years, but I'm trying to get it to zero.
Have you ever looked at a bank statement and been shocked by how much was spent on a game?
Absolutely not. I feel like if I do, I will feel bad, and I do not do it.
Thank you for sharing that. I appreciate it.
Not so much shocked, more so regretful, because sometimes the purchases just don't, make out what they seem to be, and it's very underwhelming as soon as you have it. Like they look cool in the moment, but they only look cool because you don't have it. And then when you have it, the interest of it slowly fades away over time, and then it just feels like a waste of money as you go on.
Should there be spending limits or warning notifications for younger users? And what kind of protections would be fair?
I do feel like for younger users, I do feel like spending limits or just general warnings or like a hold on a card would be better. For older users, that's the tricky part. Because like I said earlier, I can spend my money the way I want to because I understand the consequences, but putting a limit on older players is also detrimental to the company, to play devil's advocate. I feel like protections are kind of a case by case thing too. So I don't personally know what would be considered fair based on what it's spending on, so to speak.
In some countries, such as Belgium and the Netherlands, there have been implemented bans or restrictions on loot boxes. With that in mind, what kind of policy changes do you believe are necessary in the United States?
I think in the U.S., most companies kind of turn away from things when loot boxes are removed at the government level. I think we tried momentarily, or it's some of those the impact those companies made. A couple of gaming companies completely changed the way they do these cosmetics, but most people consider this like a step back. I think the entire loss of loot boxes is odd, but I think paid only loot boxes are a little ridiculous.
I mean, again, I think it really depends on how young or old the user is. I think the policies should be heavily changed for younger users. I do believe that. But as far as older users who have their own jobs, have their own money, I don't really think it should apply to them because, it's their money, their choice. They can do whatever they want with it. But for younger users, I think it would help teach them the actual value of their money if they had like limitations on them set on them.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree a lot with what those countries did with banning loot boxes. In a lot of cases in the games I played, good examples Apex Legends, you were forced to get items that you used to buy specific things. So you would never gamble. It was, okay, I spend this much money, I get this. Another really good point is most of the time these microtransactions are separate currency. So, like, you would get shards or another piece of currency to then buy an item, and it would be uneven. So, like, you'd have a leftover 300, or you'd be like 300 or 200 short and need to buy another $5 because you couldn't buy in the right increment. And I think that's super predatory, especially for children who don't really bother to do the math. They're like, oh, it's just $5. And then they'll realize, hey, that's not enough. So now I need to spend another $5 or another $10. So I think there should definitely be policies that say, hey, loot boxes cannot be sold to children and games meant for children. And whatever currency you buy is very obvious and fair for the people buying it.
As can be seen, gaming should be kept as a source of joy, creativity, and social connection, not a way for psychological manipulation and financial exploitation. By implementing federal regulations that address gambling like monetization in video games, we can safeguard the well being of the next generation of players. This issue demands the attention of parents, siblings, and college students alike, as the future of ethical gaming depends on collective advocacy and responsible policymaking. Thank you.